They thought the headlines would fade. They thought the media would shield her once again. And they believed, just like before, that she would walk away untouched. But this time, it was different. There were documents, there was audio, and there was a sealed silver case no one expected. What started as a standard congressional hearing would soon unravel into the most explosive political moment of the year. A sitting member of Congress, Ilhan Omar, was about to be accused of something that shattered the very boundaries of political discourse: allegiance to a foreign government, not in secret. Not behind closed doors, but in front of the nation. Stay with us, because what unfolds in the next hour will challenge everything you thought you knew about loyalty, about power, and about what it truly means to serve the United States of America. It was a Tuesday morning in Washington. Inside the House office building, the mood was routine. Lawmakers arrived gradually, some reviewing notes, others exchanging small talk, the usual rhythm of governance, until Marjorie Taylor Greene entered the room. She wasn't scheduled to speak. She wasn't even expected to be there that early. But her demeanor said one thing: she wasn't going to wait. She stepped forward and spoke clearly. "Mr. Chairman, I ask for immediate recognition under House Rule 11. The room paused. Every conversation stopped. All eyes turned toward her. "I rise today because the American people deserve to know the truth," she began. For months, there had been rumors, murmurs, about something unsettling. And then she said it. "I'm talking about Representative Ilhan Omar." Gasps followed. Doubt and curiosity clashed in the air. Greene held firm. This is not about race. It's not about religion. It's about behavior. Documented behavior by a sitting member of Congress. She described transcripts, communications, private meetings, and statements that suggested a disturbing alignment. Repeated actions that point to an allegiance to Somalia. The chairman responded cautiously. "Congresswoman Greene, these are serious accusations. Do you understand the weight of what you're alleging?" She answered without hesitation. "I do. And I'm not the only one who does." And then someone else entered the picture. A name many didn't expect. Pam Bondi. She came prepared, and she wasn't empty-handed. Bondi addressed the chairman directly. "With your permission," she said, "we'd like to enter new evidence into the record." What followed would shift the entire balance of the hearing, and what began as a standard session was now spiraling into a moment of national reckoning. The chairman hesitated. His gaze shifted from Greene to Bondi, and then to the other members around the table. Finally, he spoke. "Proceed." Bondi opened the case. Inside were copies, documents, transcripts, and a list of communications that, according to her, revealed a pattern. A pattern that pointed not just to political misconduct, but to something far more severe. Bondi said calmly, "As you review this material, you'll see the same names, the same meetings, the same outcomes, all linked to Representative Omar." Murmurs spread again. Even the skeptical members leaned forward now. She continued. On multiple occasions, Congresswoman Omar used her position on the Foreign Affairs Committee to apply pressure. Pressuring U.S. diplomats to adopt policies that aligned with Somali leadership. She paused, then added, "In at least 3 cases, she threatened to withhold legislative support unless her requests were honored." The tension was undeniable. One member whispered under his breath, "Is that even legal?" Before anyone could respond, Bondi played a recording. It was Omar's voice. "We must protect our brothers in Mogadishu. No matter what Washington says, if they fall, we fall too." Greene stepped forward, her tone sharp. "That's not the voice of someone working for the American people. That's not representation. That's coordination." Across the room, Ilhan Omar remained still. She hadn't said a word. She didn't flinch. Her expression unreadable, as if calculating every move. Then quietly but firmly she stood. "You're twisting my words," she said, "and you know it. My heritage is Somali. My community is Somali American. But I have never betrayed this country." Bondi didn't back down. "Then you won't mind if we continue reviewing the documents, because the full context, Congresswoman, is far worse than a single quote." The chairman looked around the room. "We'll take a short recess. 10 minutes. His gavel struck the table, but no one moved right away. The air felt heavy, thick with accusations, tension, and something unspoken. Ilhan Omar stayed behind, as the others exited. She remained at the committee table, her hands pressed flat against the wood, her eyes fixed on the stack of papers in front of her. She didn't look defeated. She didn't look panicked. She looked like someone preparing for battle. 10 minutes passed quickly. The members returned, their faces a mix of concern and caution. Pam. Bondi stood once more, this time with a new sheet of paper in her hand. "This," she said, "is a signed memorandum. Sent just 3 months ago from Representative Omar's office to the Somali consulate in Kenya." She took a breath. "In it, she offers to facilitate diplomatic pressure through unofficial channels without informing the U.S. State Department." One of the Democratic members leaned forward, visibly alarmed. "That could be a violation of the Logan Act." Bondi nodded. "Or worse, depending on how deep this coordination goes." Omar slammed her hand against the table. "I was advocating for peace, not espionage." She looked directly at the chairman. "That letter, if it was even sent, was part of a community outreach initiative. Nothing more." Green turned slowly. "Community outreach doesn't involve bypassing your own government. It doesn't involve promises to foreign leaders in exchange for political influence." Omar snapped back. "You want to talk about foreign influence? Then let's open everyone's books. Let's talk about who's taking money from oil interests and foreign tech companies behind closed doors." "You don't want a hearing," she said, her voice rising. "You want a headline." For a moment, Green said nothing. Then she stepped aside and spoke softly. "Let the evidence speak." Bondi pressed a button. A screen lit up behind the committee table. A timeline appeared. 17 meetings over 2 years. 17 separate occasions where Congresswoman Omar was documented engaging with Somali officials in unofficial capacities. According to the records, she used her committee assignments to influence policy, shape diplomatic language, and bypass standard protocol. And then, one final recording, Omar's voice again, but this time colder, more strategic. "The Americans will shift once we push hard enough. I know what strings to pull. Trust me." Bondi turned to the committee. "This audio was obtained from an overseas journalist. It has been authenticated." Omar stood. "That's out of context." She looked around the room, her voice trembling slightly but still firm. "I have never betrayed this country. I've worked for peace. My district elected me because I bring a different voice. A voice that understands conflict. Because I've lived through it." Green interrupted, louder now. "And yet you stood on American soil and gave your loyalty to another flag." "That's not true," Omar said, her hands clenched. "That's not who I am." "Then help us understand who you are," Green said, "because right now, the facts tell a very different story." The room went quiet. The chairman leaned forward. "We're entering dangerous territory. These are explosive accusations. We need due process, not spectacle," Pam Bondi responded calmly. "That's exactly what we're here to provide." Then she held up another folder. "This," she said, "is a sworn affidavit from a former staffer in Congresswoman Omar's office. Someone who claims they were pressured to alter reports because those reports conflicted with Somalia's official stance." The chairman opened the folder. His eyebrows furrowed. "She's willing to testify," he said. "She's waiting in the next room." Omar's eyes darkened. "You brought a former intern to smear me?" she asked bitterly. No, Green replied, stepping forward. We brought someone who finally had enough. For the first time that morning, Omar said nothing. And as the door to the committee room opened once again, the hearing was about to reach an entirely new level. The door creaked open. Silence fell across the committee room. A young woman entered, mid-20s, composed but clearly nervous. She clutched a folder tightly to her chest as she approached the witness table and took a seat. The chairman spoke gently. Please state your name for the record, Lena Moretti, she said, steadying her voice. Former legislative assistant in Representative Omar's office. And you understand that you are under oath? Pam Bondi asked. Yes, Lena replied. I do. Bondi stepped forward. Miss Moretti, can you tell the committee why you've come forward today? Lena took a breath. Because I watched things happen in that office that didn't feel right, she said. At first, I thought it was just politics. But over time I realized it wasn't. What specifically did you witness? Bondi asked. There were multiple instances, Lena said. Staff were directed to adjust reports, soften language that painted Somalia in a negative light. In one case, we were told to strike an entire section on human rights violations. Ilhan, Omar leaned back in her chair, arms crossed, eyes sharp. And who gave those instructions? The chairman asked. Lena didn't hesitate. Representative Omar herself. She paused before adding. She said, and I quote, "We don't throw our people under the bus. Not on my watch." A murmur rippled across the room. Even members who'd been silent up to that point began taking notes. Green leaned forward, voice level. Did you ever question why a sitting member of Congress would protect the image of a foreign government over the transparency owed to the American people? I did, Lena answered. When I raised concerns, I was told that if I didn't understand community loyalty, maybe politics wasn't for me. Bondi held up a document. Is this the memo you were asked to rewrite? Lena nodded. The original version was much more critical. What you're holding is the version we were told to submit, the cleaned-up version. Omar finally spoke. You were an intern, Lena. You never sat in on high-level briefings. You don't know the context. I know what I saw, Lena responded. And I know what you said when the cameras weren't rolling. The chairman raised a hand. Miss Moretti, your testimony has been recorded. Do you have any final statement for the committee? Just this, she said. I didn't come here for revenge or attention. I came because something didn't feel right, and if I stayed silent, I'd be complicit. The gavel came down again. But the sound didn't quiet the room. Not really. The silence that followed was louder than anything. Pam Bondi addressed the members once more. At this point, we believe the committee has more than enough evidence to justify a formal ethics investigation, and possibly expulsion. Omar stood again, her voice steady, but the tension behind it was visible. So this is it, she said. A public execution built on anonymous documents, edited recordings, and a former intern's opinion. Green shot back immediately. This is about national security, Ilhan. Not optics, not spin, and definitely not personal ambition. You crossed a line, she said, and the people watching across this country deserve to know what happens when a representative puts foreign loyalty above the Constitution. Omar's voice cracked, but only for a second. My constituents knew who I was when they elected me. They knew where I came from, and they trusted me to bring that perspective into these halls. That's not betrayal. That's democracy. But the room wasn't hers anymore. The chairman spoke firmly. This hearing is now moving into an evidentiary phase. The whistleblower will be brought forward again for closed questioning. And Congresswoman Omar, you will have the opportunity to respond under oath. Outside, the countdown had already begun. News outlets were rolling breaking banners. Social media feeds exploded. The word expulsion trended globally. Inside, the committee members sat still. No one moved. No one spoke. No one blinked. The calm before the second storm. The committee chamber emptied slowly. Some walked out in stunned silence. Others spoke in hushed tones, glancing over their shoulders as they left. Ilhan Omar remained behind for a moment, her eyes fixed on the table. Then wordlessly she turned and exited through a side door. By the time she reached her office, the story had already broken. News alerts flashed across every major network. Ilhan Omar accused of foreign allegiance. Whistleblower testifies. Omar protected Somalia's image in Congress. Green and Bondi lead stunning charge against sitting representative. Outside the capital, it was already chaos. Two crowds had formed. One shouted her name in support, chanting, "Representation is not betrayal." The other demanded her resignation, waving signs that read, "One flag, one loyalty." Inside her office, Omar closed the door and locked it behind her. She stared at the floor for a moment, then looked up, jaw set, eyes burning not with fear, but with calculation. "They want me gone," she whispered. "They want me silent." Across the building, Green and Bondi were deep in strategy. "We need to stay disciplined," Bondi said. "Let the ethics committee process the evidence. Don't get pulled into the media spin." "Too late," Green replied. "It's already spinning. But that's fine. Let it. We hit them again, right before the vote." Bondi nodded. "The press is running with it. Even liberal networks are calling it the most serious ethics case in years." Meanwhile, the ethics committee gathered behind closed doors. 12 members, 6 Democrats, 6 Republicans. All with folders marked confidential. Each had reviewed the recordings, the testimony, the documents. The chairman, an older congressman, known for restraint, cleared his throat. "We are not here to try her. We are here to decide if this case warrants action, formal action, including, if necessary, a vote for expulsion." A Republican from Texas raised his hand. "I've served with Representative Omar for years. We've disagreed on everything. But this isn't ideological. If even half of this is true, we can't ignore it," a Democrat countered. "And if half of it is exaggerated? If this is a political ambush, we'll be setting a dangerous precedent." We all agree. "She deserves to defend herself," another member said. "But the question is, do we believe this committee has seen enough to justify moving forward?" Bondi had submitted one more brief overnight. It was stripped of rhetoric. No headlines, no media spin, just dates, actions, transcripts, and quotes, dozens of them. One section highlighted 3 specific moments where Omar referred to Somali officials as "our people in Mogadishu." Another tied email edits to requests made directly by Somali diplomats. No one in the room spoke for a while. Then the chairman spoke again. "I spoke with the Speaker of the House this morning. If we forward this, the House is prepared to act within the week." Silence. Then, one by one, hands rose. 8 votes in favor of escalation, 4 abstained. The chairman signed the referral. "It will go public by noon." 2 floors above, Green stepped up to the podium. "We now know the Ethics Committee has voted to move forward. The House will decide whether Ilhan Omar remains in Congress or whether she must face the consequences of her actions." She stepped back. The room was still. Cameras clicked. Reporters scrambled. "This is not vengeance," Green said. "This is accountability, and it's only just beginning." Elsewhere in her office, Ilhan Omar sat with her legal team. The news had just reached them. "You have 72 hours to prepare a floor statement," one advisor said. "After that, it's out of your hands." She looked at the papers spread across the table. "What are our chances?" she asked. One lawyer replied quietly, "Slim, unless we shift public perception or fracture the vote." She leaned back in her chair. "So I have to do what I've never done." "What's that?" "Play their game." She opened her phone. Her hands hovered over the keyboard. Then she began typing. "To my supporters. They've come after me before, but this time They're not stopping at words. They want me erased. But I was elected by you, not by them. And I will not go quietly. She hit send. The post went viral within minutes. Supporters rallied, hashtags exploded, but so did the opposition. The storm wasn't coming anymore. It had arrived. The House floor was packed, every seat filled, every aisle watched. No absences, no late arrivals. Outside the chamber, crowds gathered around giant screens. Reporters jostled for space. The country was watching, not to speculate this time, but to witness history unfold. The speaker struck the gavel once, firm, measured, final. This House will now come to order. He paused, looked down at the paper in his hand. Today we debate House Resolution 982. The formal censure and proposed expulsion of Representative Ilhan Omar on the grounds of violating her oath of office and engaging in unauthorized coordination with a foreign government. There were no more whispers now. No more subtle glances. The accusations were public, permanent, on record. Marjorie Taylor Greene stood first. She didn't shout. She didn't grandstand. Her voice was steady, the words practiced, restrained, and devastating. I never wanted to be here, she said. I didn't run for Congress to tear down colleagues. But I did take an oath to protect this country from all enemies, foreign and domestic. When a member of this chamber undermines U.S. diplomats, pressures American institutions to serve a foreign capital, and refers to another, nation's leaders, as our people, we have crossed a dangerous line. She turned and looked directly at Omar. This isn't about where you come from. It's about what you've done. Pam Bondi watched from the front row, her posture controlled, her notes stacked neatly beside her. The heavy lifting was done. Now, it was time to decide. Ilhan Omar rose slowly. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't plead. She simply began speaking. I've been called many things in this room, she said. Un-American, traitor, terrorist. I've sat through hours of selective quotes and weaponized testimony. But I want to say this clearly. I have never betrayed this country. She looked around the chamber. The documents you read were curated. The clips you played, stripped of all context. The witnesses you summoned, rehearsed. This wasn't about the truth. It was about strategy. A few members shifted in their seats. Others leaned in. I represent a district of immigrants, refugees, survivors. I bring their voice into these halls. That isn't espionage. That is democracy. She held up a printout of one of Greene's tweets. You said I bow to Mogadishu, that I hate America. But here's the thing. If I hated America, I wouldn't fight so hard to make it better. Scattered applause rose from her side of the aisle. Small, but noticeable. I challenge U.S. foreign policy because I believe we should lead with conscience, with humanity. That's not disloyalty, that's the job. She paused. If this vote passes, it won't be because I broke the law. It'll be because I broke the mold. The speaker raised his hand. We will now proceed to a roll call vote. The room tensed. Name by name, the roll began. Ayes, nays, abstains. Each one echoed louder than the last, each one closer to the line. Bondi watched the numbers flicker on the board. Greene remained still. Omar didn't react. When the final tally came in, the chamber held its breath. On the matter of Resolution 982, the votes are as follows. 10 in favor, 205 opposed, 10 abstained. The motion carries. The gallery erupted. Gasps, cheers, cries of protest, applause and outrage side by side. The speaker brought the gavel down hard. Order! Ilhan Omar stood slowly, deliberately. She looked to the press gallery, then to her colleagues, then straight ahead. I will not apologize for who I am, she said. And I will not forget what happened here today. She turned and walked out. No tears, no collapse, just silence. Pam Bondi closed her folder. Greene let out a slow breath. The chamber remained frozen, caught in the moment between political justice and national upheaval. Outside, the country erupted into debate. Some called it accountability, others called it a disgrace. But no one, not one person watching, could deny this truth. For the first time in U.S. history, a sitting member of Congress had been expelled for alleged foreign allegiance, and the storm had only just begun. The news broke before she even reached the Capitol steps. Ilhan Omar removed from Congress in historic vote. Foreign agent allegations lead to expulsion. Green and Bondi trigger political earthquake. The headlines weren't reporting anymore. They were reacting, loudly, immediately, and relentlessly. Outside, the crowds had swelled. One side waved American flags. The other, Somali flags. One side called it justice, the other, erasure. Reporters shouted questions. Cameras flashed, but Omar didn't speak. She walked straight to her car, surrounded by aides. No interviews, no statements. No emotion. Inside the vehicle, her phone lit up non-stop. Messages from allies, threats from enemies, requests from every network in the country. She ignored them all. Back inside the Capitol, Marjorie Taylor Greene and Pam Bondi met in a private office, with House leadership. The mood was careful, not celebratory, not yet. Greene placed a document on the table. Omar's allies are already calling this racist, political vengeance. We need to stay ahead of the narrative. Bondi nodded. We stick to the facts, emphasize the process, keep it clean, keep it constitutional. A senior Republican leaned in. And the backlash? Greene didn't blink. Let them scream. We're not here to win Twitter. We're here to protect the country. Across the city, a Democratic strategist sat across from a network anchor. This wasn't justice, the strategist said. This was political execution. They weaponized her identity, made her look like a threat, and silenced her. The anchor pressed. But the evidence? Distorted, the strategist replied. This wasn't about facts. It was about fear, and how fear can be used to erase someone. On social media, the divide widened. Justice for Omar. Foreign loyalty. They silenced her, she broke. The Oath podcasts debated the ethics. Columnists clashed in the op-eds, and somewhere between outrage and vindication, Ilhan Omar stayed quiet. She didn't rush to the cameras. She didn't schedule interviews. Instead, she started writing. In her hometown of Minneapolis, she began walking the streets again, not as a politician, but as a woman reclaiming her ground. She met with local leaders. She visited community centers. She answered questions behind closed doors. One supporter asked her, "What now?" She looked them in the eye and replied, "I'm not finished. I'm just starting again." Meanwhile, inside the Beltway, Bondi and Greene remained alert. "She's not disappearing," Greene said during a late-night meeting. "She's building something, bigger than before." Bondi wasn't surprised. That's what happens when you turn someone into a symbol. You don't take away their voice, you amplify it. A strategist asked, "Should we respond?" Bondi shook her head. Let her talk. Just don't let her rewrite what happened. But already, something had shifted. The outrage was transforming into organization. On college campuses, immigrant communities, and activist networks, Omar's name was becoming something more than a scandal. It was becoming a rallying cry. They weren't debating the documents anymore. They were debating what it meant to remove her. Was this accountability? Or was this fear masquerading as justice? Omar hadn't said a word on national television. She hadn't published a statement. But in living rooms and classrooms across the country, she was speaking louder than ever, and those listening, they were preparing to act. Weeks passed. The headlines slowed. Congress moved on to new scandals, new investigations, new sound bites. But Ilhan Omar hadn't disappeared. She had gone quiet, not out of defeat, but by design. Behind closed doors in Minneapolis, She met with her most trusted circle. No reporters, no press team, no social media. "They think I'm gone," she said. "They think this ends me. It doesn't." One advisor leaned forward. "You have two choices. Step away quietly or step back into the fire." Omar didn't flinch. "I've already decided," she said. "I'm running again." The room fell still. "You know what they'll throw at you," someone warned. "They're already drafting bills to block expelled members from rerunning." "Then let them," she replied. "And I'll fight it. In court, in debates, in every district that still believes dissent is not treason." Back in Washington, Green and Bondi already saw it coming. "She's going to use this," Green said. "Turn it into a movement." Bondi stayed calm. "Let her. We took the seat, not the spotlight. But we don't let her rewrite the story." They stayed focused. Control the facts. Control the process. Control the memory. But outside D.C., something unexpected happened. Ilhan Omar's story started to resonate far beyond her district, not just among progressives, but among students, first generation, Americans, activists, and civil liberties groups. They didn't just see her as expelled, they saw her as erased, and they didn't accept that. At a university town hall, Omar finally broke her public silence. She didn't read from a script. She didn't ask for sympathy. She stood on a bare stage and said, "I was elected to represent, not to conform. I was punished for asking hard questions, for carrying the voice of a community that never had one." She paused. "I'm not ashamed, I'm not broken, and I'm not going away." The crowd erupted. Across the country, debates erupted on nightly panels. One host said they may have tried to end her career, but they might have just created a political icon. Inside the Democratic Party, the divide was clear. Moderates called for restraint. Progressives rallied behind her. Even some Republicans grew cautious. "We got the win," one senator said privately. "But what if we just made her the next national?" "Firebrand?" Pam Bondi wasn't moved. "Then we beat her again," she said, "with facts, not fear." But the narrative war had already begun. Podcasts dissected the timeline. Documentaries were pitched. Hashtags were printed on T-shirts. And still, Omar didn't apologize. She mobilized. She declined every network interview. Instead, she toured cities, held town halls, listened, spoke. At every stop, she ended her remarks the same way. "They took my seat, but they'll never take my story." By spring, the Supreme Court declined to hear her case. The expulsion would remain official. Legally, her record was stained. Politically, her voice had never been louder. On primary night, America watched again. As results trickled in, the numbers weren't close. Ilhan Omar had won. Not just returned. She won by a wider margin than before. She stood before her supporters, holding up her phone with the final vote count glowing on the screen. She didn't gloat. She didn't shout. She smiled and said, "You tried to bury me, but you didn't know I was a seed." Across the country, the reactions came fast. Outrage, celebration, division. But no one, not even her harshest critics, could deny one truth. A woman removed by Congress had just risen higher than ever before. And somewhere, back in Washington, in a quiet office, Marjorie Taylor Greene folded the election results and placed them in a drawer. "This isn't over," she whispered. And it wasn't. Because in a nation split down the middle, this story wasn't just politics anymore. It had become a question of identity, of voice, of who gets to belong, and who gets to decide what loyalty really means.